Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Andre, Senior Research Officer at the Wilfred Martins Centre for European Studies. I'm very happy to facilitate this discussion today on putting trade at the heart of a global transatlantic relationship. It's a very important topic and an important topic for us here in the European People's Party. At the very start, I'd just like to introduce our distinguished panel of experts who will bring their expertise to this debate. First up is MEP Antonio Lopez Asturias White. He is, among many other positions, he is Secretary General of the EPP, he's Secretary Treasurer of the Wilfred Martins Centre, and he is also a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the European Parliament. Our second speaker, also from the European Parliament, is MEP Siegfried Murison. He's a member of the Budget and Econ committees in the Parliament, and he is also Vice President and Vice Chair of the EPP and the EPP Group, respectively. Our final speaker is Dr. Stormy Annika Milner. She is Executive Director of the Aspen Institute in Germany, and she is also Adjunct Lecturer at the Hertie School of Governance in Berlin. So I just want to say welcome to the event and thank you for taking the time out today out of your busy schedules. Just some brief housekeeping rules before we start. I'll allow the speakers a couple of minutes at the start, 3 to 4 minutes, have some brief introductory comments. We'll take the debate from there in a moderated discussion, and we'll always allow time for questions and answers from our online audience. If you're watching this event on Facebook, please just send your message via Facebook. If you're watching it on the Martins Centre website, please just send me a question directly. My Twitter handle is @Andre. Thank you. Just to provide a little context before we start, I suppose understandably it is the pandemic which has, taken up a lot of the political bandwidth over the last 12 or 18 months. But I think what has also happened is that over the last 6 months, a series of events have occurred which, if taken together, have the potential to significantly reinvigorate and reboot the EU-US relationship, particularly when it comes to trade. We've got a new administration in the US. We've had some resolution on long-standing disputes in the aviation sector, ongoing discussions regarding tariffs in sectors such as steel and aluminium. On top of this, we've also got a new head of the World Trade Organization. And if all that wasn't enough, we've also got Brexit, which I suppose the economic effects of Brexit tariffs are now being shown up in the data. So really the purpose of this event is to provide a political and strategic viewpoint onto how the EPP can really ensure that the transatlantic relationship, particularly the trading relationship, plays an important part in this economic recovery. We only have an hour, even less now, so I won't waste any more time. With this, I hand over first to MEP Tono Lopez. Tono, I give the floor to you for your initial thoughts.
Thank you, Aaron, and good afternoon. And again, Siegfried, hello. We meet again, and also I would like to say hello to Stormy Annika Milner, and as both of my people that they will succeed me in taking the floor, are more expert than me, I will try to be brief. And contrary to my usual wording, as the ones that know me, I want to refer to some data. That's what I have a paper here that I find so interesting and speaks by itself. Trade accounts for almost 35% of the EU's GDP. Only in trade, 35%. 35 million European jobs depend on exports. 16 million on foreign direct investment. Trade is important for SMEs. After all, the EPP, we are the party that we defend the SMEs. Around 85% of all EU exporters. Total US investment in the EU is 3 times higher than investment in the US is around 8 times higher than EU, or the US is the largest trade and investment partner for almost all of the countries. Either the United States or the European Union is the largest trade partner for almost every country in the world. The European Union and the United States economies together amount to approximately half of global GDP, half, and nearly 1/3 of world trade. That's it. Everything is said. We cannot allow anything to jeopardize this, including politicians. We champion open and fair rules-based trade. Transatlantic partnership is still the most important trade and investment relation in the world. This is just not about only goods and services. It's also about democratic values, human rights, rule of law. As we see tensions increase in this polarized world, where we have several democracies and then dictatorships, and we can call them regimes flourishing around us, the transatlantic partnership must be reinvigorated to offer strong democratic global leadership. We are seeing positive signs. We are welcoming this Biden's administration proposed global summit of democracies. Also the G7 in June, the NATO summit, and so on, and the European Union United States summit also to take in Brussels. I hope, and I'm sure that it's not mine, but all these millions of Europeans that depend their jobs in this and all this investment. We are looking forward for my colleagues, politicians, that all of us, we find a way through. Some, of course, we cannot avoid saying that there are, of course, some hurdles on the way. Question of the steel has been now we are finding some compromises. The question between Boeing and Airbus, the tariffs and so on. We are obliged to find common fields. If we want, this is the secret behind the creation of the European Union. After centuries of artificial essays to create a European Union by several, people, it was at the end economy that united us. We will have a political future, but it was economy. It was trade between Germany and France that finally overcame centuries of, fighting each other. Let's do it at global level, ladies and gentlemen. And for that, we need that the US and the European Union work together and establish the best transatlantic trade partnership possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary General. MEP Murison, I'll give you the floor next.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Owen. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for organizing this debate, because we are all witnessing that the global landscape is changing again and again. It changed after the decision of the United Kingdom to leave the European Union and the election of President Trump. Just 4 years later, the decision with regards to the departure of the United Kingdom is being implemented, and the United States moves into the other direction. So especially now, after the United Kingdom becomes a third country to the European Union, but it is still not far away from the European Union. We need to learn to work together in the area of trade and economy in this new relation. And especially now with the election of a new president, I believe, Owen, Secretary General, Diatono, colleagues, it is important to discuss the topic now. It is very important that the European Commission is putting forward its new ideas, and it is very important to emphasize that EPP demands are at the core of the trade policy review presented by the European Commission. To me, the key question is, what can we achieve through trade policy? And here we have to say the following. Firstly, trade is an exclusive EU competence. So this is an area where the European Union can do a lot. It speaks on behalf of the 27 member states. It was the president of the European Commission, JeanClaude Juncker, who succeeded in finding, under difficult circumstances, common understanding with President Trump. It was none of the prime ministers of the 27 member states, because the European Commission in the area of trade speaks for all 27 member states. So it is an exclusive competence. We can do a lot. But of course, people very often expect us to do everything through trade, to achieve things in foreign policy, to achieve things when it comes to environmental goals, to achieve things when it comes to human rights, to achieve things when it comes to democratic standards. What I want to say is the following: yes, we can achieve a lot through trade. It is primarily economics in terms of exactly the number of jobs created, described by Secretary General before. So the concrete outcomes are there in the form of growth, in the form of more employment, higher quality, better paid, more stable jobs within the European Union because of trade, but also the need to adapt, because we have to be honest, some jobs were also lost within developed countries because of globalization, but some other much more stable, much more safe in the area of safe and secure, in the area of services, future-oriented, stable and well-paid jobs were created. So there is this concrete economic component, but then we can, through trade policy, also achieve, in relation with other countries around the world, as I said, objectives in the area of climate, sustainability, human rights, but trade should not substitute, and this is my next point, EU's policies in those areas. It can support, it can go hand in hand, but do not expect the trade policy to solve all problems around the world. Reciprocity is a key element, obviously, for the European Union and also for the EPP. Whatever we are ready to grant, we obviously expect to be granted to us as well. And my last point is the new concept of open strategic autonomy introduced by the European Commission in its trade policy review, which is something very much supported by the EPP. Open strategic autonomy. That means that, yes, we want to be open. We still believe in trade. We want to trade more with other regions of the world. Of course, on the basis of the multilateral order, with all of the rules of the World Trade Organization at the core of everything that we're doing. So we want us to continue to be open. Open strategic autonomy, that means we want to be open, but secondly, it means that we also want to be more strategic, and we will pursue our strategic objectives also through trade policy. We want to reinvigorate existing partnerships, particularly the one with the United States, through trade policy. And thirdly, open strategic autonomy, there is the components of autonomy. We are going to demand a level playing field. We are going to insist for fair treatment for EU citizens, for EU workers, for EU businesses in relation with countries outside of the European Union. Everything on the basis of EU values: democratic standards, human rights, rule of law, equality between men and women, all values which honestly the EPP is defending all over. I started by saying there's a moment of opportunity now because of the new American administration. The EPP has always been the political family that defended a close transatlantic relation. So all that we do, we want to do in close cooperation with our American friends. we're happy that they are re-engaging in this conversation. We know there are ideas also for reform of the WTO, and this is something that we shall be ready to discuss. The SDGs and all of the Paris Climate Agreement consequences is also something that we obviously have to make sure that they are being established at national level. I realize, Owen, I spoke too much already. I think apologies. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Siegfried. I think you hit on 2 points which will definitely come back to later, which is the opportunity for kind of a reset with the new US administration, and also the issue of WTO reform. But at this point, I'd like to welcome Dr. Milner, and maybe if you'd like to make your opening contribution.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really great to be here today. And I think the debate couldn't be more timely, on one hand, because I very much agree with Siegfried that this is a window of opportunity for a reset, a restart, but it won't come automatically, and it will take a lot of effort, which we have to invest. And we do have to do some groundwork, I would say, before the EU-US summit on June 15th. This is just a few days really from now, but we want to set up that as a success, and don't set us up for failure. So I think there's a lot to talk about before that summit, and it's really a week of summits, right? With the NATO summit in the same week, and the G7 summit also in that week, and there are a lot of issues we talk about. I'm sure we are going to talk about today, which also makes sense to talk in the G7 context, and which are actually already picked up by the G7, because the EU and the US are kind of a nucleus for cooperation in a lot of areas, but then it makes sense to make initiatives bigger pretty quickly. So it couldn't be more timely, and thank you so much for setting this up. When I was still at the Federation of German Industries, which I was until earlier this year, I was back then responsible for the TTIP negotiations, the portfolio. And the negotiations back then, I drew some lessons for this, which I think we should take into consideration when we think about EU-US cooperation going forward. And the first one is, I would say back then we were too ambitious. We tried to put too much into one agreement, one negotiations, and like investment, protection, regulatory cooperation, competition law, government procurement, so many things. And we wanted to have a package instead of a step-by-step approach, but a single undertaking, so to say. And that really pretty much failed. Not just because of the election of Donald Trump back then, but also because I would say that we do have different interests in a lot of, in a few sensitive issue areas, agriculture from our side and government procurement from the other side. But also there was very little appetite by the European public for such an ambitious project. So why I was always back then, and still am, a big fan of transatlantic integration and a big ambitious agreement, I think this is not the right time for something like this. It's now the right time for an ambitious approach, but a step-by-step approach, and harvesting what we can get on the way to get a positive dynamic going for a restart, or let's say not even a restart, but a building forward better our relationship, our transatlantic relationship. What I really liked in Anthony's first, in your statement in the beginning, you explained to us again why it's so important to have a strong transatlantic relationship. And I think we can't emphasize that often enough. It's pretty obvious, I would say, for people who work in international relations, for people of our generation, but not so much for the younger generation. So I think it really makes a lot of sense to underline the economic importance of our relationship. I would like to add two more reasons why we need each other. And that is because we share a lot of challenges and risks, and we have a lot of joint interests and values. And not everybody in the world shares these values. And to defend these values, like open democracies, freedom of speech, human rights, and so on, but also our specific belief in how we want to govern our economies, we need to do this together, because alone we are definitely going to fail. And some of the challenges we are jointly facing is a changed geopolitical environment. It is a competition globally, which has become so much fiercer, and also, I would say, more distorted. We are jointly facing a competition of systems. We are, jointly impacted by weak global governance rules and weak global institutions. And we are also facing a problem of distrust, public distrust in institutions and our public. These are joint challenges we are facing. So just a few ideas to throw into the discussion where I think that we can and should work together. The first one is on crisis preparedness, not just on pandemic preparedness, but in general, how do we prepare for crises? How do we react to them? Could we have joint playbooks, for example? So really, how do we make our societies more resilient? The second one I would say is, how do we deal with critical goods and technologies like semiconductors, metals, minerals, some health products? So how can we cooperate there? I think there's lots we can do together. The third one is improving global health. We need to talk about patents, access to vaccines, distribution of vaccines, but also about getting rid of tariffs on medical products. The fourth one I would say is climate and diversity, and how to link the trade agenda more to climate and diversity and vice versa. The fifth one is definitely technology and how we deal with new technologies and digitalization. And the EU proposed, I think rightly so, a transatlantic tech council. The sixth one is, I think, everything with regard to China, subsidies, state-owned enterprises, you name it, which leads me right to the next point, human rights and trade, another big area, lots of room for cooperation. And last one, it's not the last one with regard to priority, I think all of them have to be done at the same time. It's really WTO reform and the dispute settlement body. So I would say you need to walk and chew gum at the same time. But these would be the step-by-step approaches, I think, which would lead us to a more positive agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Milner. You've certainly set out, I think, enough challenges there for several events. Secretary General, if I could come back to you, I think we've heard a lot about how there is, potential now to kind of reset this transatlantic relationship with the Biden administration. So I was just wondering what you think the EPP's priorities should be in the European Parliament for kind of rebuilding this relationship. Do you think we should engage across a range of topics, or just focus on a specific topic like WTO, or maybe, as Dr. Milner said, not be too ambitious at the start, but to go very gradually? I'd just be interested on your views.
Let me refer to this from experience. First of all, the EPP started, building relations with the Republican Party several years ago, where they were already with the Democrat Party. My view, and I guess is EPP's views, is to have always bipartisan a relation concerning many things, but particularly trade. This applies also at European level. I'm more than happy to find some moderate socialists and left and Greens, maybe reasonable. There are sometimes more in Germany and Austria than unfortunately in my country, in Spain. that could, also be helpful in this, because I'm sure they're also worried about job creation in Europe. First is the question, there cannot be any ideology in this trade relation. I never use ideology in this. I have tried always to concentrate with colleagues from different aisles for this. Second, maybe not start so ambitious. You're right, Stormy, but also if we go to the details, then we find that my colleagues start to speak about olive oil in Spain, racetracks in Romania, peanuts in I don't know, Greece, and and then everybody has a problem. Me, as member of the European Parliament from Spain, I have a problem with olive oil, or maybe with red wine, but others will have many other problems. So it's better to keep my colleagues on a more general vision, a more general approach, because if we go to fight every little chapter, then we are not going anywhere. We need this, let's say, strategical vision. They have to understand what is at stake. That's why I read at the beginning this, for you, many of you, it's, peanuts, because you are very much aware of this data, but not too many of my colleagues. They are really not aware that so many million jobs, and the trade in Europe depends on this relation. We have to make them understand, by the way, not only in Europe, it's hard to convince a congressman from Iowa about the needs of trade with Europe, unless they have a BMW factory around. So then they become aware when they have thousands of employees around, depending in their constituency, in their state of this. Sorry, I'm talking out of, let's say, pragmatical, approach, so no ideology, and go to also, to make understand legislators, both sides of the Atlantic, about, the importance of this. And by the way, this is not an easy task.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very important point, I think, and it was definitely played out in the TTIP negotiations at the time, the difficulty in communicating the benefits and the importance of the transatlantic relationship. Siegfried, if I could come back to you, I thought it was interesting. I know that you're heavily involved in the recovery funds process in the European Parliament, but do you think that a renewed EU-US trading relationship could play a key role in kind of feeding off the recovery funds to even magnify their results to increase growth and jobs? I know this was this kind of argument went out of fashion with TTIP, but I think that the experience of Brexit and I suppose the experience of the pandemic has brought it back into focus about how we can use this relationship to really spur jobs and growth. If you had any comments, I'd be welcome.
Look, you started from the word recovery, and the truth is the following. Both the European Union and the United States are so big by themselves that the economic developments in either of the two blocks are of global importance. And this is why the state of the whole global economy depends very much on how the European Union will recover after the pandemic. This is the first element. The second element is the European Union created the largest package of economic support that it had ever created before at European level, 750 billion euros for the 27 member states. And the money comes with very clear conditionality, because the scope is to recover from this economic crisis generated by the pandemic, but also to build back better, to become more resilient, to make sure that never again in the future such a crisis can hit us in a similar way, to invest into enlarging and modernizing hospitals, to make our schools more digital, to improve infrastructure where it needs to be created and improved, energy infrastructure, digital infrastructure, transport infrastructure. All of this means that, firstly, our economy will be more competitive. That means that our products shall be more successful on the global markets. We will be able to export more because we can produce new, higher quality products, and because they will be more competitive in terms of pricing and so on, with the economy being more reformed. Secondly, money from this package shall go primarily into making our economies greener and more digital. And this means that we will invest a lot in these areas, research and innovation being a key component, so European industry will become more competitive also in the area of green technologies, technologies which we expect will be in high demand around the globe, and also in the United States in its transition towards greening. So we expect us to be able to offer more products, more diverse, also in newer areas and under more competitive conditions, including, to the other side of the Atlantic. Obviously, we shall need them ourselves, because we're not producing everything that we need in the transition to a greener and a more digital economy. And in many of these areas, the United States can be a key supplier. They have leading technologies, so it is clear that, there's good premises for our exports increasing, but it's clear that there's good premises for our imports, across the Atlantic also to increase. And my last point is, we have key objectives in the transition to the green economy, but obviously we will not be able to tackle climate change by ourselves, the European Union. And we're also thinking, how we can make decisions which shall incentivize other regions of the world to produce in a cleaner way. And this is why, at the level of the European Union, we are thinking about a so-called carbon border adjustment tax. We are going to reduce our CO2 emissions, but we want to incentivize countries around the world to do the same, and to make it harder and more expensive to basically export into the European Union products which were produced by emitting lots of CO2. So we want to become greener here at home, but we're also thinking on how we can incentivize this transition to greening around the world. And much of the EU recovery fund that you were speaking about before, Owen, will go into these objectives.
Yeah, thank you, Siegfried. Yeah, I think that's a very important point. I've gotten several questions in on Twitter. They would like me to ask about China. Just before I do that, I want to ask Dr. Milner just a specific question about the situation in Germany, because I saw that there's been a new white paper published by the German Foreign Office on multilateralism. We've got federal elections in September. So does the possibility of a Green chancellor from the Green Party, does that offer kind of a chance of continuity, or could that mark a big change in official German attitudes towards the EU-US relationship and the German transatlantic relationship?
Wow, lots of questions in one question and lots of assumptions about the outcome of the elections. But you're absolutely right. It's something which a lot of analysts are currently speculating on. How is German foreign policy going to look like? How is the European policy going to look like? What does it mean for transatlantic relations? But let me first pick up on two issues which Siegfried, which you refer to, and also Antonin. And this is, first of all, I absolutely agree. We do need to emphasize why the transatlantic relationship is important. Absolutely. It's not evident at all. So I find it's not preaching to the converted at all. There are so many who are not converted on that issue. Secondly, I wanted to underline that there are a lot of conflicts still in our transatlantic relationship, lots of conflicts, which we do have to solve. I did like that we started out with a very positive feeling of that there's a window of opportunity and there is some movement with regard to steel tariffs, but the steel tariffs are still in place. And there are some other conflicts on the horizon. And you, Siegfried, you referred to the issue of border adjustments for carbon emissions. And I think that will be a new conflictual area, because while the Biden administration showed interest in it, it will never go through Congress. And it's something which Biden cannot do via an executive order. So if we go it alone as EU, I'm pretty sure that we will have pretty quickly a pretty big conflict with retaliatory measures by many other countries. So I hope this is something which is going to be discussed in the G7 and the G20, so that we don't run into a huge problem there. And the second issue area where I think we really also need a plurilateral or multilateral approach is the digital tax. Again, if we do it alone, then I'm pretty sure that we will see retaliatory measures also by the US side. And we need to talk about these issues really quickly to not endanger the window of opportunity for cooperation. So I'm sorry, I needed to say that before I answer your question. Looking into the, what is it, the tea leaves. So you're absolutely right. Our foreign ministry just published a white book on multilateralism, and there's a lot in there which isn't surprising at all, because there is a lot of continuity. Multilateralism has always been very, very important to Germany in comparison to the US, for example, where it is a tool to reach something. For us, it's often the end goal already. If something was multilateral, that was already good, even if we didn't achieve another goal through multilateralism. I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but in a sense, it's true. Multilateralism is more than a tool for us. It's a value in itself. And you can see that very clearly in that white book. And it starts out by explaining Germany's role internationally, lots of numbers, data, which is very helpful, especially vis-a-vis the German public, to garner support for German involvement internationally, because not everybody is all in favor for Germany taking on greater responsibility internationally. On trade, what I find interesting, there you see a slight change already in comparison to previous years, and that is that labor standards, environment, and climate make up a much bigger part of the trade agenda than in the past. So this isn't something which, or let's say it differently, this is something which has started a few years ago and is increasing in importance. And you can also see that in some of the laws which our parliament just passed with regard to responsible global value chains. And this is something which won't change. Quite the contrary, if we have a green government coalition, if we even have a green chancellor, I would expect that plays an even bigger role in our trade agenda. What would that mean for transatlantic relations? I think because it's so important also for the Biden administration that there is even more scope for cooperation on climate, on diversity issues, on labor standards. But it also might spell trouble because a big part of the Greens are not in favor of new free trade agreements. And that would definitely be a change in comparison to the previous administrations, which did support Mercosur largely, for example, which did support CETA largely. And I'm not so sure about the support by a Green chancellor or Green party, although, I mean, it's a different thing, obviously, to be in the opposition or to be in the government. So there will be some readjustment, I'm pretty sure.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you very much. It's an interesting time. As I mentioned before, I've got a couple of questions and a couple more have come in. A lot of them relating to China. I'll just group them together to summarize. I suppose the essential message is, and Secretary General, I might come to you first on this, is there scope now, given everything that's happened, for greater EU-US cooperation when it comes to China, both at the WTO level and at the level of specific issues like 5G or technology or intellectual property transfer. Do you think that the EU and the US can work together to compete with China at a global level?
Look, I think that yes, that we have to work together in this, also in this case. Why? Because we are not governed by the Communist Party of China. We are democracies. China became last year, if I recall, the largest trade partner for the European Union. That is a fact. But there are a lot of realities behind that. I have received, as a member of the European Parliament for 18 years now, many visitors during these years. Enterprises, European enterprises that were invited to China, to El Dorado at that time, to make business in China. Little by little, I started to see these people coming back, their knowledge, their know-how stolen, their enterprises taken away. And this has been mounting over the years. They do not act by the same rules we have. I respect that, but if they want to do business here, they're going to do it our way. And this implies many things. Until last year, the, let's say, political ambience around China was, I was one of the most outspoken politicians that I had been denouncing this question, of the unfair relation with China for years. It seems that only last year, I believe that many others came to understand this, that we were not competing on the same level and that, this is not a fair relation. By the way, now we have started, most of you, what happened during the pandemic and the attitude of China towards the European Union. They did a big mistake there, I have to say, from public relations point of view. And also, now we are not going to forget about Hong Kong, about the minorities, persecuted minorities, about the breaking, of the rule of law, of many things that are going on. Interference, spying in Brussels, by the way, microphones in embassies around the Commission, also civil servants now under indictment to being under the payroll of the China, many things going on that finally have opened the eyes. This does mean that we have to break with China? No, not at all. My dream, my wish, I'm a little bit naive, is that maybe in the future China becomes a democracy. And, but waiting for that, I have to oblige this communist regime to play by the same rules. And it's difficult, I know, but if we don't do that, then we are on the losing side. But not Europe, democracy. And I like democracy. I love living this. Some people were telling me, "Oh, look how the pandemic was dealt in China. How quickly, the pandemic, was controlled." Well, I said, of course, if in China you went out of your house, there would be a bullet in your head immediately. Not like here in Europe, that we are a democracy. We had our confinements, but it was a respect for the human individual. And that's what I ask in the trade relation also with China. And for that, the relation, between the United States, I come to my first point, the relation between the United States and the European Union is essential. It was said before, it's not Trump the devil here. I mean, Trump was a big headache for us European institutions, not so for trade, but the tariffs, then came the conflict with the tariffs and so on, and then everything came, on the wrong side. But also Obama before that didn't dedicate too much time to Europe on the trade side. Remember that. It was focused in Asia. I can understand, it's his area of influence. So, we have to now, with Biden and with whoever comes chancellor, I hope in my case that would be, of course, CDU, CSU coalition chancellor, in this case, Armin Laschet, good friend, apart from everything. I hope, with majority not to depend, in this case, with the Greens, that could, in what we are talking here today, as Stormy said very clearly, and I share, it's not going to be, very helpful for trade. That's, with the new actors, we can build this, renewed, that was referred to before, by Siegfried and others, the question of renewed now energy in this trade relation.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's again a lot of issues. Once you delve down into trade, it's about a lot more than tariffs and quotas. Siegfried, there was a question come in. I think it might be more suitable for you. It relates to the US proposals on global tax reform that I think Dr. Milner mentioned earlier. They were just wondering, do you think that the US proposals, I think it was for a minimum tax rate of something like 15%, I think. I'm just interested in your opinion as a member of the Econ Committee. Do you think that kind of that proposal can kind of set the basis for serious EU-US engagement on this issue, that the EU can respond and meet in the middle, kind of?
Look, that can, pave the way for a future, common positions at the level of OECD and G20 on this issue, to be very short.
Thank you, Siegfried. Dr. Milner, one question for you that has come in various guises, and I think it might be more suited for you in Berlin, is, and I'll paraphrase the question, has Germany's credibility on trade been damaged by issues related to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, specifically in terms of the transatlantic relationship between Berlin and Washington? I saw that President Biden recently wrote back on his earlier threats, basically saying that the pipeline is practically nearing completion. So I'd be interested just to get your thoughts on that.
I think this is one example for the transatlantic relations, or transatlantic interests might not always align 100%. But what we need to do is talk about these issues. And this is something which is currently happening, right? I mean, there were the threat of immediate sanctions, and they have been postponed to allow for a dialogue. And there is a lot of trust and understanding to be built up with regard to why Germany has decided on that pipeline and how that might go ahead. And I think the reason, I mean, there are different risk perceptions, but also different interdependencies between Germany and Russia, and also different experiences from the past. I mean, during the East-West conflict, there was always a certain degree of economic interdependence, and Germany went well with this. So this is what motivates many people in Germany to say, well, instead of a complete decoupling from the Russian economy, we should rather work on interdependencies, which make it less likely for a conflict to intensify and get out of control. Having said this, there will also be change. I mean, if after the elections, if we have a green government or a green coalition, there will also be a change with regard to the pipeline, I'm pretty sure. And that might get us closer to the Biden administration. But the differences in risk perception and also interdependencies, that's going to stay, I would say, and that might lead to conflict in the future. The same applies to our relationship with China. There was a lot of debate and discussions about the CAI, the EU-China investment agreement, and it was severely questioned if the timing was correct or not, that the EU Council presidency pushed that through very shortly before New Year's Eve, right? So there was a lot of controversy around this. And it again comes down to different economic interdependencies and risks. And we need to talk about this in the transatlantic relationship. That's really for sure. But one last point, credibility and trade. You know what I think undermines our credibility on trade is that even we, and we are so trade dependent, right? I mean, Germany is so trade dependent. Even we cannot ratify CETA, or at least our Bundestag has not ratified CETA. And I think that really is a problem for our trade credibility.
Yes, thank you very much. And CETA brings up a whole different set of issues for a different event. I see that we only have 2 or 3 minutes left. So I guess, Secretary General, I'd like to finish with you, maybe what you would maybe hope to see in the next couple of months at the EU-US summit. I guess it's you know, some better mood music, a couple of little agreements here and there, and that hopefully that then might spill into a greater momentum.
Don't ask me what I hope. I'm a politician, you know. I hope so many things. You know? What we need is achievements. Okay, we need achievements. We need realities, and we need a lot of pragmatism during the next months, and specifically, and in June. There are a lot of meetings going on there that we have to solve many problems because the panorama, the roadmap is not easy. Again, we have, you know, I know that the leaders meeting in those meetings, you know, are far more aware of the geostrategical, you know, questions at stake, that it is to explain this to 700 members of parliament, that they have the different realities. So I guess that there, you know, I mean, I'm hoping there will be, you know, great advances. Too much hope has been put on the question of the Biden administration. Of course, compared with the previous one, this is something different. Whatever they do will be positive compared with the other one. But to which degree, which limits, which, you know, how audacious they want to become, will be seen in June. A lot of promises, a lot of good words, but I want to see the results there. Achievements, and we need that. If we do not arrive to that, then, ladies and gentlemen, we are facing a difficult scenario of economic recovery in Europe. Depends also a lot on this.
Okay, thank you very much. We're just coming up to 6 o'clock, so I think that's a good way to finish. I want to thank all our speakers for contributing today. I want to thank everybody who watched, people from all over the EPP family and beyond, SME Europe, etc. I wish you a very nice evening. I think we've all worked hard enough for today, and we deserve to enjoy some of the sunshine in Brussels. Well, let's hope for the sunshine in Brussels.
We're in different cities.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Stormy.